Chapter 19. The gardener's story continued. When men had learned to cultivate the earth, to herd cattle, to enclose their holy places within walls, and recognize the gods by their beauty, I withdrew to that smiling land, girdled with dark woods, and watered by the Stymphalos, the Albios, the Erymanthus, and the proud Crathis, swollen with icy waters of the Styx. And there, in a green valley, at the foot of a hill, planted with arbutus, olive and pine, beneath a cluster of white poplars and plane trees, by the side of a stream flowing with a soft murmur, amid tufted mastic trees, I sang to shepherds and nymphs of the birth of the world, the origin of fire, and the tenuous air of water and of earth. I told them how primeval man had lived, wretched and naked, in the woods, before the ingenious spirits had taught them the arts of God too. I sang to them, and why they gave Dionysus Semele to mother, because his desire to befriend mankind was born amid the thunder. It was not without effort that this people, more pleasing than all the others in the eyes of the gods, these happy Greeks, achieved good government and a knowledge of the arts. The first temple was a hut composed of laurel branches, their first image of the gods a tree, their first altar a rough stone stained with the blood of Iphigenia. But in a short time they brought wisdom and beauty to a point that no nation had attained before them, that no nation has since approached. Whence comes it, arcade, the solitary marvel on the earth? Wherefore did the sacred soil of Ionia and of Attica bring forth this incomparable flower? Because nor priesthood, nor dogma, nor revelation ever found a place there, because the Greeks never knew the jealous God. It was his own grace, his own genius, that the Greek enthroned and deified as his God. And when he raised his eyes to the heavens, it was his own image that he saw reflected there. He conceived everything in due measure, and to his temples he gave perfect proportion. All therein was grace, harmony, symmetry, and wisdom. All were worthy of the immortals who dwelt within them, and who, under names of happy choice in realized shapes, figured forth the genius of man. The columns which bore the marble architrave, frieze, and the cornice were touched with something human which made them venerable, and sometimes one might see, as at Athens and at Delphi, beautiful young girls, strong-limbed and radiant, upstaying the entablature of treasure house and sanctuary. O days of splendor, harmony, and wisdom! Dionysus resolved to repair to Italy. Whether he was summoned under the name of Bacchus by a people eager to celebrate his mysteries, I took passage in his ship decked with tendrils of the vine, and landed under the eyes of the two brothers of Helen at the mouth of the yellow Tiber. Already, under the teaching of the god, the inhabitants of Latium had learned to wed the vine to the young stripling elm. It was my pleasure to dwell at the foot of the Sabine hills, in a valley crowned with trees and watered with pure springs. I gathered the verbena and the mallow in the meadows, the pale olive trees twisting their perforated trunks on the slope of the hill gave me their unctuous fruit. There I taught a race of men with square heads, who had not, like the Greeks, a fertile mind, but whose hearts were true, whose souls were patient, and who reverenced the gods. My neighbor, a rustic soldier, who for 15 years had bowed under the burden of his haversack, had followed the Roman eagle over land and sea, and had seen the enemies of the sovereign people flee before him. Now he drove his furrow with his 2 red oxen, starred with white between their spreading horns, while beneath the cabin's thatch his spouse, chaste and sedate of mien, pounded garlic in a bronze mortar and cooked the beans upon the sacred hearth. And I, his friend, seated near by an oak, used to lighten his labors with the sound of my flute and smile on his little children, when the sun, already low in the sky, was lengthening the shadows, and they returned from the wood all laden with branches, at the garden gate where the pears and pumpkins ripened, and where the lily and the evergreen acanthus bloomed. A figure of Priapus, carved out of the trunk of a fig tree, menaced thieves with his formidable emblem, and the reeds swaying with the wind over his head scared away the plundering birds. At new moon the pious husbandman made offering of a handful of salt and barley to his household gods, crowned with myrtle and with rosemary. I saw his children grow up, and his children's children, who kept in their hearts their early piety and did not forget to offer sacrifice to Bacchus, to Diana, and to Venus, nor omit to pour fresh wines and scatter flowers into the fountains. But slowly they fell away from the old habits of patient toil and simplicity. I heard them complain when the torrent, swollen with many rains, compelled them to construct a dike to protect the paternal fields, and the rough Sabine wine grew unpleasing to their delicate palate. They went to drink the wines of Greece at the neighboring tavern, and the hours slipped unheeded by, while with the arbor shade they watched the dance of the flute player practice at swaying her supple limbs to the sound of the castanets. Lulled by murmuring leaves and whispering streams, the tillers of the soil took sweet repose, but between the poplars we saw along the borders of the sacred way vast tombs, statues, and altars arise, and the rolling of the chariot wheels grew more frequent over the worn stones. A cherry sapling brought home by a veteran told us the far distant conquest of a consul, an ode sung to the lyre related to the victories of Rome, the mistress of the world. All the countries where the great Dionysus had journeyed, changing wild beasts into men, and making the fruit and grain bloom and ripen beneath the passing of his Maenads, now breathed the Pax Romana, the nursling of the she-wolf, soldier and laborer, friend of conquered nations, laid out roads from the margin of the misty sea to the rocky slopes of the Caucasus. In every town rose the temple of Augustus and of Rome, and such was the universal faith in Latin justice that the gorges of Thessaly are on the wooded borders of the Rhine. The slave, ready to succumb under his iniquitous burden, called aloud on the name of Caesar. But why must it be that on this ill-starred globe of land and water all should perish and die under the fairest things be ever the most fleeting? O adorable daughters of Greece, O science, O wisdom, O beauty, kindly divinities, you were wrapped in heavy slumber ere you submitted to the outrages of the barbarians, who already in the marshy waste of the north and on the lonely steppes, ready to assail you, bestrode barebacked their little shaggy horses, while dear Arcade, the patient legionary, camped by the borders of Phasis and the Tanais. The women and the priests of Asia and of monstrous Africa invaded the eternal city and troubled the sons of greatness with their magic spells, until now, Yahweh, the persecutor of the laborious demons, was unknown to the world that he pretended to have created, save to certain miserable Syrian tribes, ferocious like himself, and perpetually dragged from servitude to servitude, profiting by the Roman peace, which assured free travel and traffic everywhere, and favored the exchange of ideas and merchandise. This old god, instantly made ready to conquer the universe, he was not the only one, for the matter of that, to attempt such an undertaking. At the same time, a crowd of gods, demiurges, and demons, such as Mithra, Tammuz, the good Isis, and Eubulus, meditated on taking possession of the peace enfolded world. Of all the spirits, Yahweh appeared the least prepared for victory. His ignorance, his cruelty, his ostentation, his Asiatic luxury, his disdain of laws, his affectation of rendering himself invisible, all these things were calculated to offend those Greeks and Latins who had absorbed the teaching of Dionysus and the Muses. He himself felt he was incapable of winning the allegiance of free men and of cultivated minds, and he employed cunning to seduce their souls. He invented a fable which, although not so ingenious as the myths wherewith we have surrounded the spirits of our disciples of old, could nevertheless influence those feebler intellects which are found everywhere and in great masses. He declared that men, having committed a crime against him, an hereditary crime, should pay the penalty for it in the present life and in the life to come. For mortals vainly imagine that their existence is prolonged in hell, and the astute Yahweh gave out that he had sent his own Son to the earth to redeem with his blood the debt of mankind. It is not credible that a penalty should redress a fault, and it is still less credible that the innocent should pay for the guilty. The sufferings of the innocent atone for nothing, and do but add one evil to another. Nevertheless, unhappy creatures were found to adore Yahweh and his Son, the expiator, and to renounce their mysteries as good tidings. We should not be surprised at this folly. Have we not seen many times indeed that human beings who, poor and naked, prostrate themselves before all the phantoms of fear, and rather than follow the teachings of well-disposed demons, obey the commandments of cruel demiurges, Yahweh by his cunning took souls as in a net. He did not gain therefrom, for his glorification, all that he expected. It was not he, but his Son, who received the homage of mankind, and who gave his name to the new cult. He himself remained almost unknown upon earth. And if this is the idea you're putting upon Yahweh, it's in a way unknown. But of course, God is noun and verb and all this. The Greco-Roman world, the more we find out about it, the more we find out that, yes, much bad as Christianity was, if this culture, if these cultures, had become dominant instead, it wouldn't have been less violent and stuff. It would have, as what we see the other, right? And if it's ridiculous to worship the one, why would it be ridiculous? It's more like, they're taking their side, right? And the Greek, required the Latin speaking culture to develop in a way, the Latin speaking culture sprung out of the Greek. But if we could look at the different translations from the Greek to the Latin and say that's the same, why can't we do the same for, other terms of things that people worship? And Christianity, of course, required Greek in particular. If it wasn't for the Greek thinkers that they mixed together, okay, so I'm rambling and I'm trying to think of something. And one of the things, whatever you worship or whatever you don't worship, there are these aspects of life, and you can dedicate these aspects of life to new ideology or different mythology, and sometimes one thing becomes necessary because another thing previously was. So the new culture, the new revelation has to incorporate some of that.